Assalamu alaikum viewers. Very sorry for the last few minutes due to technical problems. We could not get Professor Dr. Munis Ahmad Saab. Sir, welcome to the show. I hope you can hear me very well now.
Yes,
That's good. Professor Munis Ahmad Saab is academia, uh, political analyst, international relation is the subject of Dr. Saab. Uh, Sir, let's start with the same question that what is the prevailing world order and why is it so polarized?
the prevailing world order is still unipolar, which means that the United States is still in a dominating position. And its prevalence is basically very obvious in view of its military power, its economic power, its political power. So it's a unipolar world. But as I said earlier, that 10 years ago, the then American President Barack Obama, he basically cautioned the U.S. Uh, American people that the U.S. may not sustain its supremacy in world order, may not be a unipolar, may not be the only superpower. So that has basically been true because there's an erosion as far as American power is concerned. And there are other stakeholders, there are other global powers emerging in the last 15, 20 years. So, technically speaking, the world order is still unipolar, but it is being transformed as a multipolar world. And let me add here that after the end of the Second World War, the world order which came into existence was bipolar in nature. That is, there were two centers of power, the Soviet Union and United States. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, the world order got transformed as unipolar world order. Before 1945, the Second World War, the world order was multipolar, meaning that there were more than two centers of power. Having said that, I think the polarization in world order is because of two reasons. The first reason is basically that China and Russia, the two major powers, these two major powers, they want to break the monopoly of the United States, and for that purpose, they have they form sort of an alliance. That is one thing. The second thing is basically that no global power can sustain its influence forever. There's a history to it. So the United States is losing, the United States is on decline, and during the Trump administration, the world order got more and more polarized. And the polarization basically means that when there's tension, when there is confrontation, when there are conflicts. So the United States during Trump administration was able, to unleash the process of confrontation with China, with Iran, and with other countries, even with the Western allies, the group of seven countries. The United States was not quite smooth, was not very much compatible with. So, by and large, antagonism against the U.S. Flourished during Trump administration, not only as far as China is concerned, but also Russia, Iran, and various other powers, including European Union. So that is the reason I say that the world order is polarized, and there's a vacuum in world order. America, the United States, has not been able to play a leadership role, which has been very much obvious and manifested during the pandemic crisis. That Donald Trump was unable to lead his nation, and the United States, despite high tech, despite its supremacy, its edge in science and technology, is the only country which has faced maximum casualties because of the pandemic and the coronavirus. More than 160,000 people killed in the US. So that is the reason I think the world order, which is composed of. Let me define world order again, which is composed of global economic order, military order, security order, political order, information order. So These pillars of world order, which was basically established after the Second World War, these pillars have transformed in the last 30, 40 years, and we have seen the emergence of new players in the world order.
Right. Very
Right.
true, sir.
Very
Very
true,
true.
sir. Very true.
Dr. Sab, where do
That's
you
where do
see
you
China
see
in this
China
all?
in this all?
Well, China, that's very interesting because a country which was called as an opium-ridden country 150 years ago, a country 100 years ago, 150 years ago was occupied by six European powers. That country is now called a dragon, which means that in the last 40 years, that is since 1979, the open door policy, which was promulgated by the then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. And to respond to your question, I think we have to take into account three major factors and the reasons that why and how China has emerged as the world's second economic power. And China will soon be at par with the US as far as the global economy is concerned. The first thing is primarily the policy, open door policy of Deng Xiaoping, 1979, which basically rejected the old policy which was in practice since the Communist Revolution in China in October 1949. That is to focus more as far as global revolution is concerned, communist revolution is concerned, to support national liberation movements, socialist movements, communist movements. So since 1979, there was a paradigm shift as far as the Chinese policy concerned, and that paradigm shift basically focused on economic development, economic progress. The second thing, primarily, that which Deng Xiaoping made it very clear that China will not confront with any of its neighbors. China will not get itself involved in any regional or global conflicts. So, therefore, the last war which China fought, that was when it attacked Vietnam in January 1979. And since then, we have not seen any Chinese military involvement except in case of a limited military involvement, which was manifested, which was seen in case of Ladakh this year. But that was very limited. Uh, in case of Vietnam, there was a war between China and Vietnam, and the Chinese forces had penetrated inside Vietnam, but later on withdrew from. And that was I think, the turning point. And they decided that China will not involve itself in any sort of issues with the neighbors. Will have try to have peaceful neighbors. And the third thing is primarily that how China and Russia were able to mend fences, that there was a border war between China and the then Soviet Union. But after the visit of the then Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet president, to the People's Republic of China in May 1989. So that was something which was called as a turning point. It was a milestone in Chinese and in Sino-Soviet relations. And after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the mending of fences between the two giant neighbors. And now we see that China and Russia are not only peaceful neighbors, although there are issues, unresolved issues, but a lot of trade, economic, commercial activities taking place between China and Russia. And the Chinese do not consider Russia as a threat anymore. So that is something which we have to take into account. The change in the Chinese leadership, the policy, and things like that. And that basically led to when China emerged. In 1980, the foreign exchange reserves of People's Republic of China were hardly $1 billion, and the trade was very insignificant in the mid 70s. But the opening of China and how Chinese they were able to capture the markets and the exports. So nowadays, presently, the Chinese foreign reserves are roughly around $3 trillion. China's economy, the economy is around $18 trillion. which is amazing, and that is which basically alarmed the United States, because the U.S. argues that the Chinese economic surge, or the foreign reserves, and this and these were basically primarily the outcome of its trade surplus with the U.S. Every year, the Chinese had a surplus of $200 billion. So the US was losing every year $200 billion, and that $200 billion added to the Chinese economy, its foreign exchange reserves. So therefore, what China has done, it has to do with the leadership, it has to do with the vision, and they came out with the Belt and Road Initiative, $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion project of connectivity, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, and many, many other projects. In a big way, you can see the Chinese investment in Africa. They were able to build, a high-speed railway in Kenya, between Mombasa and Nairobi, and their investments in Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and elsewhere, and
Sri
Angola,
Lanka.
in other countries. So Africa basically has been almost taken over by the Chinese economically, not. And the Chinese, what they have done is that they have also bought millions of acres of land. They have purchased in Mozambique, in Zimbabwe, in Angola, elsewhere, from where the cultivation, because the Chinese expect, they fear that there will be a food shortage. So that is one thing which, and then in Asia, also in Europe, in Latin America. So that is what is the Chinese. But then there are also gray areas. I mean, we should not take a look at only one side of the picture as far as China is concerned, and be very much feel positive about that in future also the Chinese may hold their the level of their of their progress. There are gray areas, certainly, as far as China is concerned. There are fault lines. For example, Hong Kong is one issue, is a major issue between mainland China and Hong Kong, because Hong Kong was returned to the Chinese people of China in 1997 by the British. Then there is the issue in Xinjiang, which is the western part of China, the human rights violation over there. The Indians are again trying to patronize Dalai Lama of Tibet, and then the human rights, Taiwan, South China Sea. So there is a policy which has been, people know about it, to contain China. The United States earlier, according to the Truman Doctrine, had a policy of containing the Soviet Union. And that policy, of course, ended after the disintegration of the Soviet Union. But now they have a policy to contain the gigantic, the monster, and the dragon, the Chinese are called as. And how would you contain? So there is some sort of hidden type of an understanding as far as the four powers are concerned. These are United States, Japan, Australia, and India, that you have to contain China. And for that purpose, the disputes in the South China Sea, because that is one area which is contested between the Chinese and the Vietnamese and other Southeast Asian states. Therefore, China tried to seek an alternate to lessen its dependence on the Strait of Malacca, because 60% of its trade it passes through. So it realized that it can have Gwadar as an alternate. So the Gwadar port, from Gwadar to Kashgar, so that saves time, that saves distance. But Chinese, they have to be very mindful as far as their issues are concerned, because the West is very much concerned about the rise of China, that China may overshadow their power, their strength, 400 years of Western supremacy. Although I think it has been overestimated. The Chinese, they are not number one in technology. They are because the technology, the innovation, research, development, these things, these basically the domain still the domain as far as the West is concerned. Europe, United States, Australia, New Zealand, these countries, first world countries. So therefore, one has to keep the fingers crossed of what you asked
Right.
about China, that the euphoria that China will come to stay as a major power and China will overtake the United States, China will overtake, and will emerge as number one. It may happen. I'm not saying it will not happen. But then we have to understand that there are countries in Southeast Asia and East Asia who are very fearful of the Chinese. Japan is, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Singapore. These are the countries, Cambodia. These are the countries which are very much concerned about the what they call as the yellow peril, the rise of the yellow peril. So, but the Chinese
Right.
have proved to be very wise so far. They have. It is said that it is argued that there will be a war between China and India. No, China is India's largest trading partner, $100 billion of trade. So I don't think that neither India nor China will afford to. Likewise, that there will be a war between China and the United States. No, it is not in the Chinese interest. It is also not in the American interest. And then certainly, a war basically means a nuclear war, which will basically which will end as far as destruction of the world is concerned.
Right. So wonderful. So how do you see the upcoming American election and the change in White House?
Well, that is very interesting. I think 2020 elections, as a result of the pandemic, two things have happened. The first thing is basically that, I mean, this year is not good, is not very much positive as far as the Republican Party is concerned, as far as Donald Trump is concerned. It all started with the outbreak of the serious this pandemic crisis. That how the U.S. economy, trillions of dollars gone, lost. The American economy got shattered. Absolutely. The damages which were caused during 9/11, the damages as a result of the coronavirus and pandemic are far more than 9/11. So this is one thing which we have to bear in mind, that 2016 elections in which Donald Trump narrowly he won uh, elections, 2016 elections, because of the economic issue, because of whatever, and he was able to rest assured, he was able to assure the the white middle class, the unemployed youth, the of the white origin, that he will do something for them. He has failed, and the economy has gone down. So there's a lot of frustration in the U.S. The second thing is about the polarization as far as race is concerned. That how George Floyd he was killed, cold-blooded murder on I think May 23rd this year in Minneapolis, and that led to the outbreak of racial violence in the U.S. And Trump, instead of openly condemning the brutal murder of George Floyd, he kept silent. Later on, he criticized, he condemned, he expressed his sympathy, but it was too late. And then the American, people, they openly they argued that Trump, being a white supremacist, covertly speaking in a subtle manner, he was the one who motivated the what we call as the white supremacists or the Ku Klux Klan, and he threatened to use the U.S. military against the demonstrators and the images outside the White House. Then when Trump went inside the church with the Bible, and the demonstrators were literally, uh, coerced uh, and beaten up, tear gas shells against. So the images that Trump was a person who never ever cared about human rights, who never ever cared about racial, the polarization in the U.S. So these are the two things which will have a serious impact as far as American elections are concerned. And then, of course, that the third thing which Trump has done very foolishly is that he has started criticizing the vice presidential candidate from the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, and he is saying that no, she is not American. Although she was born in Oakland, in California, just like Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. Although Barack Obama's mother was white American, father was from Kenya. In his case, Kamala Harris, the uh, the uh, the mother is from India, and
Yeah.
father is from another country, African country. So basically, to target your opponent in a clumsy manner, that will be counterproductive. Hardly 3 months are left, and I say that I would say that much depends as far as the world order is concerned. Much depends as far as the American foreign policy is concerned, domestic policy is concerned, the outcome of 2020 normal elections. The opinion polls reflect that Trump is 8% behind Joe Biden, and Joe Biden, of course, is not a very, you can say, courageous or a person who will take a position like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was I think um, from the socialist ideology and his adherence to socialism and things like that. But he had a very strong following, particularly as far as the American youth is concerned. So Biden was acceptable to the status quo oriented forces, to the left of the center forces, and then Biden was able to get the nomination from the Democratic Party as the presidential candidate. And Joe Biden remained as the American vice president for 8 years. So he's experienced also. Kamala Harris as a senator, as a very powerful in field of law and all that. So I think the strategic blunder which Trump committed, that calling Kamala Harris misfit, and lady who doesn't qualify to be the vice president because of her background. That is wrong, because the American Constitution clearly says that anyone who is born in the U.S. can be eligible for president and vice president. Now, I would like to add here that Dr. Henry Kissinger, who was born in Germany, then he migrated to the US after during the Second World War, the Nazism, fascism. He was the National Security Advisor 1969, 1970, 1970, 1971, 72, and then he became the Secretary of State. Uh, uh, why he couldn't become American president? Because by birth he was not American. Otherwise, he would have definitely, although he being a Jew, it doesn't matter. But if you are not born in the US, one cannot contest as far as the highest, the seat of power, that is the president, and the number two, the vice president. Otherwise, those who are naturalized citizens, they can become Secretary of State or they can have other positions. So therefore, it all depends that how the Republican Party, how Donald Trump will have his election campaign. Will he attack? Will he attack? Will he launch personal attack? And the last but not the least attempt which Trump has made in order to enhance his popularity or his chances to win elections, that is to arrange a deal between the UAE and Israel. That is another topic. What UAE has to do with Israel? Unlike Egypt, unlike Jordan, unlike Syria, unlike Lebanon, because these four states are the frontline states and the neighbors of Israel. So, to show and to reflect that a victory, an achievement of Trump administration it doesn't make sense. So it will have American elections of 2020 will certainly have a very significant impact as far as the world is concerned, as far as the US is concerned, because whosoever will take charge in the White House will be in great trouble. economically will has to put the economic house in order. And then, of course, the most important thing about the 2020 elections, that even if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I mean, if Joe Biden wins, then Kamala Harris will also be victorious. If they are able to reach White House, right? And if Democratic Party fails to gain majority in Senate, it will be problematic. Because American president, although has powers, can veto, some of the resolutions of the Congress and things like that. But if Democratic Party is unable to have its majority in the Senate, it will create problems for Democratic Party. Because the Republicans will try to create hurdles, Republicans will try to. So it is very important because in the House of Representatives, Republicans have a majority. So, unless they lose that majority, I don't think that they will lose the majority in the House. But certainly in the Senate, if they're able to win the majority, get the majority in the Senate, then for 4 years, Joseph Biden as the president and Kamala Harris as the vice president, they will be able to implement some of their policies, although healthcare and other issues are there. And then the most important thing is about to put the American economy back on the track, which has been seriously hit hard as a result of the pandemic crisis.
Right, sir. Great. Please tell us about the change in White House having some, effects on the Kashmir cause and especially relationship with Pakistan.
Yes, one thing which I would like to mention here is that Joe Biden and his team, they have worked hard. They created 30 groups, or rather, 30 groups dealing with various foreign policy issues, like the Palestinian issue, like dealing with China, dealing with Iran, and as far as Kashmir is concerned. Uh, Biden has clearly made it clear. He's clearly made it clear that if he comes to power, he will basically take a position as far as the situation on the ground in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir concerned. That is something which is very interesting because if we see the track record of Democratic Party, it has always been pro-Indian, always been pro-Indian. Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton and others, always been Obama, not exactly pro-Indian, but also neither pro-Pakistan. So what I'm saying is basically that the policy group on Kashmir uh, reported to Joe Biden that the US must take a position, must not accept the illegal revocation of Article 370 and 35A, or revoking the special status of Jammu and Kashmir in the Indian Union, which last year, August 5th, what had happened basically, like in the Lok Sabha of the Indian Parliament, which is the lower house of the Indian Parliament, they passed a resolution which was called as Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. And according to Act, the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, which was granted in Article 317/35A, was gone. And Jammu and Kashmir was then absorbed in the Indian Union. A union territory, separate union territory for Ladakh, and separate union territory for Jammu and Kashmir. The human rights violations, the lockdown, the world experienced lockdown after the coronavirus. But the Kashmiris of the valley of Kashmir, the Muslim Kashmiris, 8 million Muslim Kashmiris, they have been experiencing lockdown, serious human rights violations, serious search operations, and things like that. Killings and the injuries, the pellet guns, and even pellet guns were used even before August 5th. That has these things have made their lives miserable. Asia Watch, human rights organizations have reported that Indian occupied valley of Kashmir, it has become a big prison. So Joseph Biden, he says that we will take position on the basis of principles. Kamala Harris is of an Indian origin. But what Donald Trump has said, commenting on Kamala Harris, that although she is of an Indian origin, but I have more Indian followers. Likewise, the Indian diaspora in the U.S. is quite strong. It's quite influential. So to expect Democratic Party, that when it comes to power, saying is one thing, doing is another thing. So Joseph Biden, he has taken a policy position that if he comes to power, he will raise voice against injustices in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. It is yet to be seen if he when he takes oath as the president of the U.S., when Kamala Harris is the vice president, when they come to power, then one has to see to what extent Joe Biden will implement his pledge. This is one thing about Jammu and Kashmir. Uh, and then of course the United States, as we know very well, has a lot of stakes as far as India is concerned. In case of trade, in case of then the nuclear deal, civilian nuclear deal, which was reached as early as during George W. Bush's visit to India in 2005. The role of Indian diaspora in the United States, in the Capitol Hill, in the Pentagon, in the State Department, at the centers of power. We have to see that once Democratic Party comes to power, to what extent it will take a position sympathetic to the beleaguered population, Muslim population of the valley of Jammu and Kashmir, because American support is very important in the UN Security Council and elsewhere to basically pressurize India to reverse its arbitrary, illegal acts of August 5th. The second thing which I would like to mention here is about Palestine. That on the Palestinian issue also, the policy paper or the policy plan of Democratic Party or the team of Joseph Biden has clearly said that they will not support the Israeli absorption or annexation of West Bank. This is what they have done. Although one can say that Joseph Biden has welcomed the UAE Israeli deal, that Israel will not annex anymore the territories of West Bank, because Benjamin Netanyahu, as the Prime Minister of Israel, it has been more than 20 years. He became Prime Minister in 1996. So more than 20 years, 24 years, he has a policy of outright rejection of a Palestinian state. All the way from George W. Bush to Barack Obama to Donald Trump and elsewhere, they have been advocating a two-state solution. Israel offers Palestinians a makeshift state, thoroughly dependent on Israel, because the Israeli government of Netanyahu has been able to settle millions of Jews in the West Bank, to the extent that what the BJP and the Shiv Sena and the Indian Prime Minister and the Indian state, they're trying to change the demographic complexion as far as the Muslim majority valley of Kashmir is concerned. Likewise, the model is basically the Israeli model of West Bank, that in 1917, when there was the Balfour Declaration, which advocated a separate Jewish state in Palestine, the total Jewish population in Palestine in 1917 was not more than 7%. But after the Balfour Declaration, the First World War, the League of Nations mandate system, and things like that, when Palestine was given to Palestine was given to Britain as a mandate, and a policy to settle Jews in Palestine, and the demographic ratio changed in favor of the Jews. In West Bank, which was occupied by Israel during June 1967 Arab-Israeli War, the Jewish population was hardly 6 to 7%, but now the Jews in the West Bank are roughly around 25 to 30%. So that is a big thing, and that is what is the objective of Netanyahu's government, to inundate West Bank with Jewish settlements, so that and then to annex West Bank, like they have annexed Golan Heights, which was part of Syria. They've annexed East Jerusalem, to annex West Bank. This is something which will negate the two-state solution, and Joseph Biden has made it clear that if he comes to power, he will not accept that. The third thing is about WHO, World Health Organization. Donald Trump has been very critical of WHO as a result of the pandemic crisis, has withdrawn from WHO, World Health Organization. Joseph Biden recently said that the first thing which he will do as the president will basically to revoke the American withdrawal from WHO, and will rejoin World Health Organization. But still, I would say it all depends on, as far as Kashmir is concerned, Palestine is concerned, WHO. And the fourth thing is about Iran, that during Trump administration, the US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, and that has something that is something which has caused a lot of alarm and concern in the West, that Iran will resume its nuclear weapons program, the proliferation thing. Biden's team on Iran, on the foreign policy agenda, has said that they will try to engage with Iran. They will try to again, pursue a policy, and may rejoin the Iran nuclear deal, the 5+1, the five permanent members of UN Security Council and Germany. If that happens, then certainly all over the world we see polarization, we see division, we see various other types of the conflicts. So there will be a positive change. Certainly, that is one which one can expect.
Great, sir. Great. Professor Dr. Munis Ahmad Saab, Dr. Saab, we are short of time. Just a last question I would like to have from you quickly. That is about, Pakistan-US relationship and the change in White House.
Okay. Well, during Trump administration, I mean, that was something which was very contradictory. That in his New Year tweet of January 1st, 2018, Trump blasted Pakistan. We paid them billions and billions of dollars, and Pakistan has not been helpful in Afghanistan. Is promoting the Taliban, patronizing the Taliban and the entire U.S. Operations against U.S. operations against. But then the same Donald Trump became very positive about Pakistan. Now, as far as the how the 2020 November election results will have an impact on Pakistan, it all depends on Pakistan itself. Absolutely, there is no doubt about it. To what extent Pakistan has been able to stabilize as far as economy is concerned, as far as political stability is concerned, because the thing is basically that if a country is unable to put its own house in order, certainly it will not have a clout or an influence as far as the world is concerned, or the world capitals are concerned. So it all depends on Pakistan, but certainly uh, with Kamala Harris, I'm not saying that Kamala Harris will be pro-Indian or will be pro this and that. She's American, certainly, and the interests of the US, which she will adhere to. We have to see, because that, because Trump, he wanted to to withdraw fully, completely American forces from Afghanistan. That has not happened. Uh, by November 2020, there will be still around 5,000 American forces in Afghanistan, so there will not be a total withdrawal. Pakistan's role in Afghanistan is very important, absolutely, which is recognized by the Trump administration, which will be recognized by the Biden administration. And Joseph Biden, he is not a stranger. He was the vice president of the United States for 8 years. So he's very much aware of the dynamics of Pakistan. The thing is basically that he will try to re-engage Pakistan. Absolutely. The Foreign Action Task Force (FATF) and the SWAT was lingering that Pakistan may be declared, may be put under the blacklist. It will not happen because we have fulfilled most of the conditions. The legislation has taken place, and one can expect that Pakistan will be removed from the grey list and put on the white list. So primarily, the new American administration, the White House, uh, will see to what extent Pakistan has been able to play a positive role in Afghanistan. Certainly, there is the Saudi factor because the new American administration, unlike the Trump administration, will not be very positive about Saudi Arabia. Absolutely. The first visit, official visit of Donald Trump was to Saudi Arabia in 2018, or yeah, something like around. So, and if there is a thaw in U.S.-Iranian relations, so I think there will not be some sort of a hostility on the part of the Biden administration vis-a-vis Pakistan because they still consider Pakistan as a strategically important state. There's no doubt about it that strategically, geopolitically speaking, Pakistan has a clout, has a position. South Asia, West Asia, Central Asia, Gulf, Arabian Sea, things like that. So we have yet to see how things unfold vis-a-vis Pakistan after the American elections, and if Donald Trump wins, right? If he is able to return to get victory, so we'll see the continuity, some sort of continuity. But in case of Democratic Party, again I say that it depends on if the Democratic Party is able to seek control of Senate, because foreign policy matters are debated, are discussed, and approved by the Senate, American Senate.
Very true. Professor Dr. Munis Ahmed Saab was our guest today, and the topic was Will Change in White House Transfer World Order and its Impact on the Region. Sir, thank you very much. Looking forward to see you
Thank you very
again
much.
with another topic.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So kind of you, sir.